Hello, Facebook Live. I'm Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com and the Breathe Life's Inspirations blog. I have had a weekly Your Health on Stress and What You Can Do video blog going on for a little while. So if you're interested in that, go over to my website, miracleinspirations.com, and subscribe. I will send you weekly information. Today, I want to talk about quality of animal products. And does grass-fed matter when it comes to beef, cows, and a couple of other types of livestock? So, um, I used to be vegetarian for like 10 years when I went to college. And the reason why I did that was for ethical reasons, because I didn't like the thought of killing animals, depending on animals for food, and certainly not the whole factory farming, CAFO meat kind of thing. And I just objected to all of that. I believe that is the motivation that a lot of people have for choosing to be vegetarian and or vegan. Um, and I was vegetarian for 10 years, about 10 years, until it got to a point where um, I was pregnant and I couldn't get enough to eat. Like I was starving all the time. It was long before I learned about how to improve the quality of my eating and my food and stuff like that. It was certainly better than average, but insufficient, really, not good enough, nowhere near the quality of food that I eat now. But I found myself in this place of physically not being able to eat enough. And so I started eating poultry at that time and then fish. Um, and then at some point I started eating red meat again. And I have had an interesting experience quite a few years ago where this was after I had moved to Canada. I mean, I've been living in Canada now for quite a while. So, um, and when I am in Canada, I don't work very much in terms of massage and body work. Most of my body work practice is still down in Olympia. So I go down to Olympia for a couple of weeks at a time, and then I come home for a month, and I'm down in Olympia for a couple of weeks at a time. And I've been doing this now for 12 years, a long time. So in the beginning, when I was going down to Olympia, I was not bringing any red meat with me. So, maybe I'd have a little bit of fish, maybe I'd have a little bit of poultry, but I really wasn't making sure that I had red meat. And then it reached a point where I noticed that as it was, a little past a week, week and a half, getting close to my 2 week time period down there, that I would start craving lamb. Like my body was saying, you need this. And it had me realize, oh, you know what? I really do need to have the red meat on a consistent basis. And so now I bring it with me when I come down. Or I buy, sausages is the form that I usually purchase when I'm down there if I want red meat. But my body does not do well without it. Now, it's been quite a long time since I was vegetarian, but I am much more aware of my body's responses and my body's need now than I was um, at that time. So just understanding that there are nutrients in animal products and in red meat in particular. So it's like I wouldn't want to live on um, white meat, meaning um, poultry and fish. It's just not sufficient nutrients for me that I would get to a point of needing, like craving, like I noticed before, um, craving the red meat. So, what is it about red meat that makes that difference? I think there's different nutrient makeup. There are nutrients available in red meat that aren't as available or maybe not available at all in the white meat products. So just understanding that. Um, so now let's talk about grass-fed cattle in particular. So beef, um, and does grass-fed make a difference? Because that's the topic that I chose for today. Does grass-fed make a difference? So it absolutely does. So I think everyone who is going to be watching this Facebook Live already understands that factory-fed meat is not good for you, the person consuming the meat, and it's not good for the animals. The animals are not healthy, and it's not good for the environment. I mean, all the way around, in my opinion, not like I have control over this, right? In my opinion, factory farming is not good for anyone. Basically, the whole point of factory farming is to produce as much animal food as possible, as cheaply as possible, mass produced. And it does not have anything to do with nutritional value, quality, and the ability to produce healthy food for the consumers. It has nothing to do with, certainly has nothing to do with the health and happiness and sustainability for the animals. So factory farming with cattle, they actually spend most of their life on eating grass, on grass. And then when it comes to the point where it's the short period of time before they're going to slaughter the animals, that's when they go to the feedlot. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. I think some people still think that they spend a larger percentage of their time in the factory farming situation. And it's like, no, they spend most of their life out on grass. Okay, then they go into the feedlot for finishing, and to tell you the truth, I don't know what the length of time is. And during that time, what they do is they basically feed them exclusively what I consider garbage, right? So there's a lot of grains, genetically modified grains. So it's like the soy, corn, canola remaining from making canola oil. There's probably going to be cottonseed cake left over from making cottonseed oil. You know, just like a lot of stuff that is not considered food for humans, they feed it to livestock. Plus, I have also heard that like waste junk food, candy, you know, probably, you know, maybe even moldy bread, I don't know, right? But all kinds of stuff that technically can be considered food, but no human being would ever want to eat it. That's what winds up going into livestock feed. For, I'm just going to make it up like I don't know the facts. So for cows and pigs and chickens, dairy cows, pigs, you know, all those animals that go through that factory farming process, they wind up feeding them this junk feed, what I consider junk feed. I mean, they wouldn't call it junk feed, I suppose, but stuff that is not considered edible for human beings. So I talked about genetically modified crops a couple days ago, and was talking about the industrial corn and industrial soy, industrial canola, those industrial food crops that a lot of it is used for oil production, food oil, vegetable oil production, okay? But a lot of it also goes into animal feed. So it's like they grind up the soy and they grind up the corn and they feed it to chickens, cows, pigs, right? All of those animals as the you know, mass of the food that they're eating. Aside from it being genetically modified, which we talked about, okay? Cows, let's get back to cows, okay? Cows are designed to eat grass. What their bodies are built for is to eat grass. So if you take the predecessors of our modern cows, right? You know how you have bison, right? Oryx, those kind of big cow-like animals. What did they eat? They ate grass. They wandered around on the plains, right? And ate grass. That's what that type of animal, their body is designed to eat. What happens when you give an animal food that it's not supposed to eat? Imagine taking a lion lions that we know are designed to eat animal flesh. What would happen if you tried to feed a lion, soy and corn, right? They wouldn't eat it. They wouldn't be able to eat it. They wouldn't be able to digest it, right? Their bodies would not be able to be healthy eating that kind of diet. And when it comes to carnivores, like, lions, right? They don't even try to feed them in any environment. They don't try to feed them that kind of food because they know that, it just wouldn't work at all. In this case, you have these cows, these animals in captivity, right? In pens, right? And they go up to a feed trough and they eat whatever it is that the human beings put in that trough. It's all mixed up together so they can't separate out, right? So it's like if you take a bunch of my food and you put it on a plate, right? You got a bunch of vegetables, you got a piece of meat, and I can pick and choose what I want to eat. But in a factory farming situation, they can't. It's all mixed up together. The grains, the gunk, probably, left, waste candy. I don't know what they feed them. Pastries, I've heard they have, waste pastries, bakery food, stuff like that. All mixed up together in this trough. And then the cows just eat whatever is there. But cows are not designed to eat that kind of stuff. Cows are supposed to eat grass, plant material, probably some weeds, whatever would be growing in the field. Okay, so when cows eat grain, it makes them sick. They're eating food that they're not supposed to eat. They have 4 stomachs that are supposed, is that true? Yes. Cows chew their cud, and then the food goes through, a series of 4 stomachs to break down all the fiber and stuff like that in grass and turn it into fatty acids that help the cow's body to function. And, like carbohydrates, right? But the fats and carbohydrates that the cow is supposed to get for their nutrition supposed to come from grass. So when they feed cows grain, I imagine it probably ferments because they have 4 stomachs, right? It ferments in their stomachs and it makes the cows sick. It gives the cows infections, it makes them ill. So imagine how your body would be if you were sick all the time because you were eating the wrong food all the time. You might have pain, I don't know, you might get infections, all sorts of things, right? But they have cows in this environment where they're eating the wrong food, and they're in these feedlots with all these other cows, right? And they're not able to wander around and eat grass. They're in there and, they have their urine and their feces and all, they're just standing in it. So if any of them have any sort of infection or whatever, and it's like, if we're not feeding them properly, of course they're going to get sick. So they have, infectious stuff in their feces, in the urine, and they're all standing in it. And so they're all going to get infected, right? Contributing to the problems that we have with food poisoning, right? Food poisoning coming from factory produced meat products. Yuck. So when you have cows who live on pasture and they eat grass, that's what cows are supposed to eat, and they're healthy. So they have bacteria in their 4 stomachs, and that just helps them to break down the grass and turn that grass into high quality nutrient dense food. Part of it, they turn, bacteria in their stomachs, I imagine, are involved in this, turn something in the grass into fatty acids, including a fatty acid called conjugated linoleic acid. I might have pronounced that wrong. CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. So that is a fatty acid that if you start feeding that cow grain, finishing a cow on grain is what even some grass-fed beef producers, they will finish their cows on grain, right? So for the last month of the cow's life, they will feed them grain to fatten them up, right? Why would grain fatten them up? Because they're not supposed to eat it. It's all this carbohydrate and they're not supposed to eat grain. So just like happens with humans, when we eat too much grain, too much carbohydrates, right, we get fat. Well, that's what they do when they put cows in a feedlot, right? They give them all this grain to make them fat and the marbling and stuff like that in the meat. But even grass-fed producers, sometimes what they will do is they will finish their cows on grain for the last month. So it's like we get our beef from Ken's sister and brother-in-law. They raise beef and they finish their cows on grain. We get them to not do that for the one that we're going to use because we don't want that. Okay, so part of what happens as soon as you start feeding the cows the grain, okay, the conjugated linoleic acid, which is a valuable fatty acid for our health and nutrition, right, that a purely grass-fed cow will have conjugated linoleic acid in their system. And so when you eat the meat, you get the CLA. Okay, as soon as you start feeding a cow grain in the finishing process in that last month, the CLA in their body goes down to the point where there isn't any more of this valuable fatty acid. So that is one of the reasons why you want beef that is exclusively grass-fed, not finished on grain. Now, it might be hard to find it. I don't really know. I guess it depends on the source. Okay, so it's like for our family, Ken's sister and brother-in-law, they always finish their cows on grain, except when we can get them to not do that for the one that we are going to be purchasing from them. Okay, so just understand that that's one difference where exclusively grass-fed makes a difference, is in conjugated linoleic acid. Okay. Other reasons why grass-fed matters. I think I talked about, the infections and stuff like that. Oh, so antibiotics. So because in this factory feeding environment, right, infection can be rampant, right? So they feed them antibiotics in their feed every day. It's just mixed in with the stuff that they buy to feed to the cows, antibiotics. And so they just have a low level of antibiotics all the time, hopefully to keep the, bacteria, whatever they might be, right, under control. E. coli, right, salmonella when it comes to poultry, right, whatever bacteria could be causing a problem, an infection, they just try to keep it under control with this low level of antibiotics. That makes it so the animals aren't as healthy, because if you have antibiotics all the time, there are a lot of reasons why they would not be healthy. Okay, one is that it kills the beneficial bacteria, the microbiome that we talked about, that is so important for our ability to be healthy. The same thing with the animals, right? So it's like, it's bacteria in the stomachs, the digestive system of the cow, right, that helps to break down the food and make the nutrients, make the conjugated linoleic acid, make all the fatty acids, right? It's like the bacteria in the digestive system are involved in all of that. So when you have a low level of antibiotics all the time, what happens to the bacteria? It could be killing the bacteria that are in the digestive system that are supposed to help all that to function. Is that part of why cows get sick and have problems with their digestion when they're feeding them grain with all the antibiotics? Possibly, but it's common practice. Like it's what they do. So antibiotics in the feed causing the cow to be unhealthy. Antibiotics in the feed also contributes to antibiotic resistant bacteria. Have you ever heard of antibiotic resistant bacteria? Part of why that happens, the bacteria become resistant to application of the antibiotics because they have a low level of antibiotics that they're exposed to all the time. So they get used to it. They learn how to survive that antibiotic. leading to antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the animals, which may mean they need more stronger antibiotics for those livestock. But it could also be that we humans, because we wind up having low levels of antibiotics in our system when we're eating these things, maybe those antibiotics will be not as effective for us if we ever have infections. So it's like we have antibiotic-resistant strep, where it's like they have a hard time being able to eradicate it in hospitals because it's not able to be killed by any of the antibiotics that they give them. Is part of that occurring because there's a low level of antibiotics in our animal products? Maybe. Could it also be contributed to because, we're using antibiotics in the herbicides that we use, and so it's in our food all the time? Could be, right? So it's like there's all these problems that we have with use of the antibiotics causing problems with health and infections and things like that, getting out of control. When you have factory farming, okay, you also have a problem with where does all the waste material from these animals go? So feces and the urine, and this is true for all of forms of livestock, right? Cows, pigs, chickens, all of them. They produce these waste materials. So in these factory farming conditions, you have a lot of animals in a confined space. It's not a natural space, right? And so where's all their waste go? They collect it in these ponds, these waste ponds. And then what do? They dry it, or they take liquid and they spray it on our crops. They spray it as fertilizer on the crops used to produce our food. They find a beneficial use for this toxic material. So if those animals have any infections, do you think there might be some infectious agents in the feces and the urine in these ponds that smell to high heaven, right? That make communities sick just by breathing it, being in the neighborhood, being, having get in the water, get in the land, in the soil. I watched a documentary the other day that was talking about that, right? Where because of factory farming, communities become sick, non-functional, property values go down. It makes people sick being around any of these factory farms because of the odor and the pollution, right? All of this stuff. And then they take the waste and they spray it on the crop fields. So if there's any infection there, is that why we have these like infectious agents in our food supply sometimes? Like spinach, lettuce, don't eat romaine right now because it's because they spray livestock waste. It's probably got infectious agents on our crops. All of that happens because of factory farming. So if you have animals raised in natural ways, meaning cows being able to wander around and eat grass, there's ways of doing that now where it's called rotational grazing, where you move them from one place to another place. So it's like they're here, they eat the grass, you move them to another place where there's fresh grass. All of their waste goes out and actually does fertilize the field in the small amounts, and then they tramp it in, right? And then the sun and the bugs, right? The worms, they take care of it. So if there were any infectious agents there, even though those animals are going to be healthy because they don't have all of the problems that cause the infection and lack of health, right? Any infectious agents that might be there are taken care of by the sun and the soil and the bugs in the soil and where all that stuff, it's like it doesn't spread infection. That's the way livestock are supposed to be raised. Pastured chicken, pastured pork, have animals that are able to wander around outside, eat bugs and worms, grass, pigs root around, so it's like eating the way animals are supposed to eat, living the way animals are supposed to live. So those animals are healthy and happy. A cow lived life like a cow. A pig lived life like a pig. A chicken lived life like a chicken. Happy and healthy. Getting everything they need. That's what food, real food, nutrient-dense food, comes from. From animals that are raised the proper way, the humane way, rather than factory farmed. So, I went on a little rant there, but that's a topic that I can really get into, right? I would no longer ever choose to be vegetarian because I realize that there are nutrients that our bodies need that cannot be readily obtained through plant-only sources. That's my choice. I'm not going to force it on anybody else. But if I know people who are vegetarian and they're sick, I have been known to say, hey, you might consider eating animal products again. I used to be vegetarian, so it's like I totally understand. I know vegans who have made themselves very sick, done permanent damage to their bodies by being vegan. And as soon as they switched to, eating animal foods again, they got healthier. Though some people, someone I know of was not able to fully recover. Still has pain every day, continually, because of the damage that was done by being on a vegan diet. Takes a long time, but it does happen. So, animal foods that are produced in ways that animals are naturally supposed to be, live, thrive, be happy and healthy, producing food for humans that is healthy, sustainable for the earth, sustainable for the environment. That's what food should be. This is Sandra Lee with miracleinspirations.com and Breathe Life's Inspirations blog. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about food variety and why that matters. Thanks. Have a wonderful day. Oh, and let me know what you think. Suggestions, comments, all of that are welcome. Have a wonderful day. Breathe.